Welcome to the Fostering Change Podcast, Season 3. I'm Rob Shear, the founder of Comfort Cases and your host. Together, we have made such a difference in the world. We've met with leaders and change makers in the foster care system. We've met with charities and philanthropists, celebrities, authors, and so much more. We'll continue to bring you guests who will share how together as a community we can bring about change. Welcome once again to Fostering Change. You know, it's so hard to believe that the month of November is almost over. I hope every single one of you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. You know, there's several holidays throughout the year that I love, and Thanksgiving is one of them. And it's not just because I love turkey and stuffing, but I love the fact when our family comes together, and it's such a large family because, as you all know, we have 5 kids, and, you know, between their friends and cousins, and it's just a time of just coming together and showing so much love. But I will have to tell you, my next guest, I am totally starstruck. You know, I'm really lucky. I get to meet some of the greatest people. I have become friends with such amazing humans. But when I read this story, and actually, I didn't actually read the story first. Someone tagged me on a social media and says, "Do you know this family?" And I was like, I have to know this family. And then the next thing you know, I'm reading about them in People. I'm reading about them on the Today Show. And just last week, again, they aired their this little video number that they do, which I absolutely love, that was aired on the Dave Thomas Foundation Instagram. And Rita, who is such a good friend of mine, she knows how much I love it. So ladies and gentlemen, those who are listening and those who are watching, please welcome my friend, Pam Willis. Pam, welcome to Fostering Change.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You know what, Pam? You are an absolute dream, and so is your husband. And let me tell you why. I see kids all the time throughout our country who go into foster care, and there's more than one, and they get split up. And, you know, I thought about when I first saw your story. First of all, when I saw your story, I didn't realize that you already had grown kids. You know, that this was your second time around the moon. And I'm thinking to myself, I have 5 kids. I cannot imagine if I have to go through this again. But one thing that would really surprised me is that one of the things that you was important is that the children didn't get split up.
Absolutely. And you know, to back up a little bit, we did raise our 5 children, and as they started to become, you know, moving out of the house, and a couple of them were getting married, and, you know, they were going on and doing their thing. And my husband and I decided that was a good time to start fostering. So we started fostering when we had still 2 teenagers in the home, and we fostered just little ones, 0 to 5 years old. And we just started learning so much about what a wonderful experience it is, whether they're reunifying with their families or whether they're going to other family members. I mean, we just felt that it was such important work. And it was, you know, hard. Obviously, it's hard on your heart. You fall in love with these children, and then, you know, they don't stay. And that's hard sometimes, but it was so gratifying to know that you were a part of easing that pain or that trauma or that, you know, that just scary time for those kids. That was something that just kept us coming back to fostering for about 5 years. And as we, you know, so my 2 youngest were teenagers as we started, and then 5 years later, as we continue fostering, you know, they're moving out and they're moving on. So our youngest of our 5 was just about to graduate from high school, and at that time we only had 1 foster baby in the home, and we knew that he was going to a family member. We were just waiting for that family member to be certified, and so we were building friendships with that family member and having visits often and doing transition with this baby. But we kind of knew like this was the end of that particular time, and we weren't going to have anybody in our home, and our kids were all going to be gone, and we have a 6-bedroom home, and we were just kind of like, what do we do? You know, we've been parents since we were very young. My husband and I've been married for 33 years already. We got married when we were 18. We just thought, what do we do? We all we know how to do is be parents, and that's our jam. We just love it. We love our big family. We love, at that time we already had grandchildren even, that were, and so we just kind of were at this crossroads of, do we sell our house and kind of move nearer to one of the grown kids, or do we stay here? Do we keep fostering? Like, what do we do? Do we foster in a different community? And that was a time period where interesting that you mentioned social media, because that's exactly where I saw the story of these children. I live the next county over, and I happened to see a news story that was posted on Facebook. Someone had reposted it, like one of my friends. Hey, look at these 7 siblings. They're in need of a forever home. And of course, I always stop on stories like that because it just tugs at your heartstring. And I have a heart for foster care. I have a heart for, any children who are in need of a home and a family. And I stopped on that story. I thought, 7, oh my gosh, they're never going to find someone to have room for them. And then, like that very split second, my brain said, but you have room for them. And it was instantaneous. That moment, I thought, that's it. That's what we're supposed to do. That's exactly what we're supposed to do. And there was just no doubt in my mind, just instantly, that those 7 children were supposed to come to my big empty house that I had been wondering what to do with. And so the next thought was, how do I tell my husband that this is what's supposed to happen? Because he just doesn't know it yet, but this is it. So I went on that social media post, and I just tagged him on that post, just so he could read it, a little prep time, a little mental work before I approached him. And so I went to him that evening and I said, I'm ready for to give him all my reasons why this is supposed to be. And I said, hey babe, did you read that story I tagged you in? And he goes, oh, the 7 kids? And I said, yeah. And I'm getting ready with my arguments. And he goes, we should adopt them. And it was just one of those moments where you realize, like, you're both in sync, and it has come to you. It has been placed in front of you. What are you going to do next? And we just said to each other, this is it. We should do this. And so, the process started. We called and, they said, we have thousands of phone calls about this, we got to vet through everybody. So it took a little while, and we weren't sure. I just was glad that thousands of people had called. I said, oh, good. I'm so glad that they're going to be taken care of. I was so worried that nobody would take care of them. So I kind of felt like, well, there's thousands. Nobody would pick me, I'm just glad they're being taken care of. And so I kind of went back to my, okay, good, they're okay. But I couldn't stop thinking about them. And so, like 2 days later, I called again. I was just checking, making sure that, if nobody's able to take, we're certified and we have a big home, and just checking, just making sure, okay. And so I'm like, okay, they're taken care of, but I just couldn't get them out of my mind. And I kept going back to that story, and I kept watching the video that was, here's these kids, and they're so great, and they've been in foster care for a year, and their parents have passed away. And my heart just kept, I wanted to help them. I wanted to be their mom. I just felt like they need me. I can't explain it, but they were just mine from the minute I saw them.
But I have so many questions. So, okay, so first of all, 7 kids. Now you got 12 now.
Right.
7 kids, but why were they in the system for a year?
So what had happened with them was they had, just a really quick summary. They grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and they had been living there with their parents. Kind of, their parents were trying to make it and bouncing around, kind of, apartment or a house, or they'd do well for a while and then they'd be homeless for a little while. So they had a rough beginning. And I think that their mother knew someone who had moved to San Diego and was doing really well. And so she kind of thought, that's a great place for a fresh start. So they sold and got rid of everything they had. They hopped on a Greyhound bus and they went to San Diego, which is about an hour from me. They were homeless there for a little while, and then they were in the park, and then they lived in a homeless, like a tent shelter for a while, and then they got into an apartment. and things just weren't going well still. It wasn't the way they imagined that it was going to be. So they were there for like 8 months, and they decided, you know what, we're going to move. We're leaving. Let's go to Texas. We've got friends in Texas that are doing well. Let's go to Texas. So they packed up everything they could in this little U-Haul. They bought a used vehicle, and they decided, let's go. We're going to Texas. And on the road, on the way to Texas before they left California, there was a major motor vehicle accident where they just their car involved, so somehow went off the road. Nobody really knows how or why. The parents were immediately killed. The children were all thrown from the vehicle. They were all sustained injuries. And the oldest one sustained the most injuries. Some of them had to be helicoptered out, and the little ones weren't injured that much, surprisingly, because there weren't car seats or seat belts or anything. So it was really a miracle that they all survived. And they went into foster care because they found a home that would take them all together. They were kind of crammed in, but they were together, which I'm glad that they were. Through that year, the social workers set about looking for some family members or somebody who could take them. They really did their due diligence in searching with family. The problem was the mother and father had grown up in foster care themselves. And so they really didn't have strong family ties with anyone. They had, just a lot of strained relationships. The kids were kind of like, oh yeah, we don't talk to that person. We don't know, and we don't even know who that is, kind of thing. And there weren't any family members who were really able to take them. They have a half sister that lives in Las Vegas, but she's young. She was expecting her first baby, just like 20 something, so she wanted to, obviously her heart, she wanted to, but she just, wasn't at a place in her life. So they exhausted all of their efforts in trying to find a family member. And then they decided, let's do this news story. And so by the time they were doing the news story, it really had only been about 6 months in foster care.
Not to cut you off, but then it was another 6 months. And the reason I'm asking this, and one of the things, Pamela, people know about me is that I'm a man who says what I feel. And I grew up in this system. And as a kid who grew up in this system, a kid who aged out and became homeless, a kid who has adopted 5 the most beautiful babies I feel in the world, I feel like there's a lot of lag time for these kids. And I feel because of that lag time, we're seeing more and more mental illness that is brought upon these kids. If we could just, and here's a good example, in their situation, their parents have passed away. It's the worst of worst.
Right.
So, immediately I feel, this is why I always say, there needs to be a national database, okay? So we could all be connected somehow. Where for my children, 2 of my kids, I have 2 sets of siblings. I refuse to split kids up. And one of my sets of siblings was severe abuse, and there was no way the parents were going to be ever given their children back. But then there was another set of siblings I had who had the word neglect. And I just felt like as a community, we failed her more, and so I see these kids, and for a year, they're, my kids suffer from PTSD. I have one child who has fetal alcohol syndrome. I have one child who has reactive attachment disorder. I have a child who has ADHD, and all of this was bounced because of all the many houses. The fetal alcohol syndrome, that was what he was born with. But everybody else, it was the constant bouncing. So were they in this one home for 6 months before they came to you?
Initially, out of the hospital, they were in just a group home for a short period of time until they were all discharged. So maybe like a few weeks. It's called Polinsky Center in San Diego. It's pretty well known in this area as, it's a temporary. It's not meant to be, to house people. But they were in the Polinsky Center for about a month, and then they found this home for them to go. That was at the beginning of summer. And so they went into this home and they spent their summer, just kind of going to Boys and Girls Club and kind of just, adjusting to what just happened here. They had a lot of issues prior, with the homelessness, and there was some neglect, and I have 3 with fetal alcohol. So I get that 100%. So I think, in shock that entire time that they were there. I think they were still just in shock. It's a trauma when children are removed from their home, absolutely a trauma. But it, I think, is a very different kind of trauma when there's well, why is my mom and dad this, or why aren't they this, or why can't they this? At this time, it was just, they're gone, period. Those questions don't even exist because they're gone. So it was a very different type of trauma than I was used to dealing with. The finality of it was, in some ways, I think, easier to address because I'm not trying to conjecture about, well, mommy's, sick, or doesn't, she drugs make her very sick. You're kind of trying to tell innocent, sweet children that you've fostered, and, why mommy and daddy are sick, or why mommy and daddy can't take care of them, or why they have to come live with you. That part of it is always so hard for me because I never want to say anything that, disparages them, but I also want them to understand that, they're sick, and addiction is horrible.
And it's an illness. And it's an illness. I have a 20-year-old who actually came to us at the age of 18. And so he, the way I have to talk to him is different than my 17-year-old daughter who arrived at the age of 4. And now she's at that age, because we were very similar what you are. You don't want to badmouth the birth parents. You don't want to, and even though we're already adopted, you still, and now all of a sudden I've got a daughter who's like, why didn't you tell me? And it's just like, well, I didn't want to. So it's that constant give and take, your catch, like I said, you are my hero. You are my hero. You got these 7 babies that you bring home. And by the way, my 20-year-old is still a baby. You got these 7 babies that you bring home. You already have 5 other kids, and you call them up and you say, you're going to get 7 siblings. What did they say?
So my 5 older ones?
Yes.
What did they say? Oh, well, varying responses. So my younger one, when we were fostering, it wasn't that big of a stretch for them. They were like, 7, huh? That's a lot, Mom. It's kind of, but it wasn't a foreign concept to any of my kids, having been a foster family for 5 years. Even my older kids, when they would come, there would be different foster children in the home that they always would make them feel like part of the family, no matter how long they were there for, so that part of it wasn't an absolutely foreign concept. I think my oldest one, he's very sensible. He's like, is this, financially, are you going to be okay? And that was his, retirement and all that, Mom and Dad, making sure. That was really his concern. Just nothing about like, why are you bringing other people into it? Never was that ever mentioned. It was, are you going to be okay financially? You're still going to be able to retire when you want. You're good. And if you say you're good, then fine. And, they're all just very, very accepting. My 2 daughters, they're 27 and 23, and they've got a heart just like I do for these children. I mean, they fell in love with every child that came through my house, and they were just as much a part, if sometimes even more a part. My daughter graduated from high school, and the whole year that she was at home still, she was like my nanny, because I'm working here in my office and she's downstairs taking care of the kiddos that we have. So she fell in love with these babies. It was never a stretch for them to say, and they know their mom just kind of, she sees something, she goes for it. They watched me go to law school when they were in middle school.
We haven't gotten to that yet, and now I'm so excited. Listen, everybody, whether you're listening to this on one of your favorite podcast platforms, or maybe you're tuning in on our YouTube channel, I am telling you, you are under a rock if you have not heard about this family. I have seen them, as I said, in People Magazine, The Today Show. Every time I turn around, they're on Facebook or they're on Instagram. And by the way, not because they're putting themselves out there, it's because we all cannot get enough love. And when you see this, there is one thing I say to everyone. There's one thing to love someone. There's another thing to love someone unconditionally. We're going to take this quick break and we'll be right back. Comfort Cases is so excited to once again to be partnering with a premier luggage brand, Briggs & Riley, for National Adoption Awareness Month. Now through the end of November, for every $10 donation made at briggs-riley.com, Comfort Cases will receive much needed funds, leading to the elimination of trash bags being given to children entering our foster care system. Donations will go towards the purchase of Comfort XL duffel bags. These are 32-inch duffel bags that the youth will be able to use to store their belongings in. Briggs & Riley supports Comfort Cases' mission to bring hope and dignity to our youth that are in foster care. Don't forget, Giving Tuesday is November 30th. This is an added reason to help someone in need this month. So please visit briggsandriley.com and make your tax-deductible donation today. Well, I will tell you, you all see and hear the excitement that's in my voice, and it happens quite often. We are in season three of Fostering Change, and my guest, I have been wanting her on for so long. I've been wanting her on since the first time I saw her on social media. I wanted her on when the person in my center brought me the People magazine for me to see her in, the fact that I got to watch her on the Today Show, but her and her husband did something that I could not even imagine. I always talk about the fact of having 5 kids, but just imagine having 7 arrive in one day. One day. And that's exactly what Pam and her husband did. We've heard about the story. I don't think a lot of you knew this, but Pam and her husband, they had already had 5 kids that they had grown. I would be thinking of retirement, but instead they bring home 7 children to have a forever family. Pam, how long did it take for you once the children arrived for the adoption?
Well, that's a great question because the pandemic played in. So I saw the news story in January. I called right away. I started having some serious meetings with the social workers from San Diego in February, and then in March they officially matched us, and we got to meet them about mid-March. So they were moving along. They had a real desire to keep the children in their current school situation for a couple more months to allow them to finish the school year, because it was just kind of the one piece of permanency that they had had in a really, really long time. Prior to that, they'd been homeless and moved and all of that. So they really just wanted to give them that. So we just visited. We drove down and visited every single weekend, and we had a couple overnights and things like that for the transition. But so they moved in like the day after school was out, because I was like, all right, school's over, let's go. So it was great because there was an 8th grade graduation for the oldest. There was a 6th grade graduation for the second oldest. It was really something that they had not experienced before. And, it was something we made it special and gave them flower lays, and that's kind of our family thing. So it was great to be able to have that for them. And they moved in June. And in California, you need to foster for 6 months prior to being able to adopt. So we knew we had the 6-month time period that they would be considered foster in our home. Although, before they even stepped foot in our home, they were ours from the beginning. It was a formality, really. So we processed all the paperwork starting in December, because that had been, the 6-month time period. And we got a court date in March. Took a little bit longer than we wanted, but we were like, well, that's cool. It's like exactly 1 year from when we met, and we're going to go to court on, our anniversary of meeting you. So it was neat, to know that it was like that we're coming full circle in that little anniversary. And so we were getting closer, and the pandemic started to really hit the US, and we were like, ooh, things closing, like the courts aren't closed yet. And then 3 days before our court date, they closed everything, and we were just so crushed. It was so hard to say, we're not getting that little piece of paper. We're still going to have to go around with all our paperwork going, yes, there, like it was just 7 of them, and paperwork for 7 of them. You have to prove who they are everywhere you go, So for me, it was more like, can we just be done with all this? They're already our kids, So we ended up having to wait until August. So that was 5 more months. We probably could have done a Zoom appearance a little bit sooner, like a couple months sooner, but I was kind of holding out because I wanted them to have this big celebration and like really a momentous. I wanted them to have their day in court,
Oh, I know. We've done it. I know it. And you know what? The sad part is, The people don't realize what the pandemic has done to children that are in the system. My son is 20 years old. We should have finalized his adoption 20 months and months
Yeah.
and months. But pandemic has caused it. We still haven't finalized it. And
Yeah.
I'm just like you. Maybe I could give a little and be in Zoom, but my son's been in foster care most of his life. And the fact is I want his day in court. I want the day like my other boys and my daughter had, with all the balloons and all the family
Right.
comes into town, and it's a
Right.
big huge party. So I love
Yeah.
that. One of the things for me, Pam, and I get this quite often as a public figure and someone, who I'm in the media quite often about, being a dad who adopted through foster care. They think that we're millionaires.
Oh yeah.
And they think they were making all this money. And, for us, and this is going to be kind of surprising, I think, for you. When we adopted our children, it was not acceptable for gay men to adopt. And so the foster care system would not allow us to have an attorney. So normally, as in they assign attorney. So we literally had to hire our own attorney. And
Wow.
so, over $60,000 later, it cost us to adopt our four, which I always tell my husband I would have paid that money 20 times over. But now I think people need to understand, even for same-sex marriages, for all, the cost is not there to adopt a child.
Right, right. I think that I'm really glad that you brought this up, because I think that it's important for people to understand that all the things that I mentioned about, People Magazine today and all of that really kind of it started with my Instagram. And I started this Instagram just to say, hey, this is a wonderful experience. These kids are amazing. Like, you could do this too if you have the home, the heart, the time, and you want to do this. And I really started with just that little platform of, let me tell you how great it is. These kids are wonderful, brought some joy to my life. And it started like that. Now, my 27-year-old, who is a social media influencer, was like, oh, we should make some TikTok videos of you. It'd be so cute. And you'd get more people to listen to your message about foster care. And so she makes her living on Instagram. I've never made a dime from Instagram. I don't know how she does that. I'm in here in this office working where I've been for the last 10 years, but she was like, hey, let's do this video. So it was fun, it was cute, and I thought, well, more people will get the message. They'll understand about foster care. I love when people message me and say, how do I get started? Where do I go in Texas? Or I'm in Ohio, or that brings me so much joy, because I think I might be helping kids, and I share stories where they highlight children, and they say, this child is waiting. I share those all the time, and people are like, oh, that's my state, or, oh, how do I get in touch with the people that work with, I want to know this child. That brings me the greatest joy. So my daughter made this little video that was like our life in 15 seconds kind of thing, and it was catchy, and it was cute and trendy and whatever, and it ended up picked up all over
All
I
over.
guess you could
It was called viral, my friend. Viral.
Yeah. And I guess like Michael Bublé shared it, Kristen Bell shared it, and suddenly when they shared it, the Today Show was like, hey, we want to feature you. And then it was People Magazine. It was this big flurry for a while. But again, my focus has always been to share the message that this isn't as scary or as foreign or as expensive as you mentioned. I think so many people think adoption expensive, and it's not necessarily that way. And I just love just kind of debunking that myth and saying, no, it's not. It's like maybe the little upgrades you have to do to your home to get, lock up your medicines and put outlet covers and, lock
By
up
the
your
way, you
knives.
do anyway. By the way,
Right,
you do
right,
anyway.
right,
I remember we had to put a new railing on our stairs. Well, we should have had that new railing anyway.
right,
It's like, and the thing that really, when people do not understand, children are in foster care because of choices other people made. Okay?
right,
They're in foster care because of other choices people made.
right,
And so this
right,
whole concept that these are bad kids. There's no such thing as
Yeah.
a bad kid. It's only a kid that needs to be redirected, a kid who has never been given the path that they need. And, I hear that quite often is that, oh, but kids in foster care are bad, or kids in foster care are there because they are bad. No, kids are there because choices other people made, and we have an opportunity to make the right choice for them,
Right.
and I'm like you. I mean, so and you and I have got to connect offline because my friend Leanne Tui, she every Friday, and I want to get you involved in this. Every Friday, Leanne posts one child in our country that is waiting for a forever family.
Oh,
Okay.
I love it.
And so she used to do it, and Leanne's from The Blind Side. She used to do it, the movie was based on, where she adopted the young boy
Yes.
from the Ravens.
Yes.
She used to do it only in the month of November. And last year
Mhm.
she was talking to me and she said, I'm going to do it every Friday for 1 year. Well, just yesterday, another match. And so she played these
Oh,
matches because I truly believe with what you're doing, what she's doing, what we all can do, the more that we get in front of these people, the more that these people are educated. As
yes.
me, I used to always get so mad at my community when I was a young boy. And then I grew up and I realized my community loved me. They just didn't know it.
Yeah. Right. Right. And that's so true. There's so many people who just don't understand it. They're a little afraid. I think it's a little bit scary to take a teenager too. I mean, to me, at first, I didn't take teenagers because I had a teenage boy and a teenage girl in my home. So I was kind of like, let's just do younger ones, so I don't have to worry about any of that. Maybe the boys don't get along, or the girl, or there's some kind of, oh, you're cute. So I kind of stayed away from that for a little while and did younger kids. And when this set of kids came, I thought, well, this is going to be interesting, and hope that I can help them, because I know how to help little ones. You provide safety, you provide security, you provide food that they need, you provide good sleep, and suddenly they magically transform into these, you know, children who are just totally different than the ones who didn't have any of that. They just have this chaos going on, and once you calm that chaos in their little brains, they really transform. Well, what I found out was it was really similar with teenagers. I mean, they are just as in need of this love, as much as they might not want to admit it. They're just as in need of this safety and this security and this love and this normalcy. They just want what everybody else has. They just want to be kids. They don't want to be the parent of the little ones anymore. They don't want to take care of their mom or dad, or they don't, they don't want to worry about where they're going to live, or how they're going to explain why they didn't have enough money for the field trip, or all of these things. Like, they don't want to worry about any of that. And so my husband and I just we thought about it ahead of time. We brainstormed. We said, these two older ones, they're just going to be kids. They're never going to babysit the little ones. I mean, my biological kids, I would be like, yes, you got to babysit your sibling. That's kind of part of it. These guys grew up doing that. They don't need that
That's all they
anymore.
knew. That's all they knew.
That's all they've done. I mean, they would have to stay home sometimes and from school, to babysit, because you have to do what you have to do sometimes when you
Yeah.
don't have the means.
And you're right. I'm the youngest of 10 kids, and, growing up in the system and being split up. But I had one sister who missed almost 2 years of school because she had to stay home to take care of my sister and I, because, that's what she had to do. But, you talk about the older kids and of how they just want, I'll never forget when my son Alex came home. Again, he was 18 years old. And every single night I do the same exact thing. I go through the house and I say goodnight to each one of my children and to tell them I love them. And every single night, Alex would always say goodnight. But my other kids would say, goodnight, Daddy, I love you. And Alex had been with us for a couple of months. And I did my typical going through the house, saying goodnight to each one of my kids. Goodnight, Tristan, I love you. Goodnight, Grayson, I love you. Goodnight, Makai, I love you. Goodnight, Amaya, I love you. And I said to my son, Alex, good night, Alex, I love you. And he looked up to me and he said, Pops, I love you too.
Oh, You never forget that first time they say it, do you?
Oh, it was. I literally walked out of his room. I'm crying. My husband's like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
I said, not only did he call me Pops, he said he loves me. And so you get it, you feel it,
Oh
you
my
know it.
gosh, yeah.
What do the kids call you?
They call us mom and dad. The littlest one started calling us mom and dad pretty quickly. And I think that that's very common with littles because, we had 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old at that time. And they just crave. They need dad, or they need mom. They need that figure. And to them, that name of mom or dad means caretaker. And it doesn't, to them, it's not necessarily as significant as a teenager using that. That's a conscious choice for a teenager. I think for littles, it's just a natural inclination. Like, you're the caretaker, your dad, or and so the little ones wanted to call us, and they asked, can I call you mommy? And yes, of course, anytime you want. And I still remember the first time each of them said it, because it just kind of just really makes your heart burst. And sometimes they went back and forth for the first couple months, between my name and, whatever. And I told them, whatever you want to call me, it's fine. They kind of, in their own time, it was comfortable to them to say mom and dad or mommy and daddy. And the older ones took a little bit more time, and they'll even admit it. They'll say, I started calling you that because the kids were calling you that, and it was kind of like more it just for continuity. But it took a while for you to feel like that. And I get that totally, because especially with some of the conflict you have as an older child, like, mom or dad isn't necessarily a great idea in your mind. Like, they have a lot of anger that they have to work through, and they have a lot of issues. And so using that name of mom might conjure up things that are not so great or not so happy. So, I didn't push that. And my oldest, he still says ma instead of mom. And I think to him, that's his differentiation, which is fine. If he never wanted to call me that, it doesn't matter to me. I am just providing to him sort of the example and the figure that he can take on in his life and say, okay, that's what a mom does, or that's what a dad does. And I think he's really bonded with my husband, the oldest. I think he just really, he says to him all the time, you're my best friend. And, my husband gets to be the fun guy. He's kind of the laid back, chill, like, hey, let's go do this fun thing, and let's not tell mom we're getting drive through McDonald's, and then you got to eat your dinner when we go home. Let's not say, that's my husband's thing. He's always been that way, even with my first 5. That's just his thing. And the kids love that, because they just feel like they're in on something special. And, I'm the one that's, how are your grades? And I'm the one that has to do kind of the hard stuff. So
Oh my gosh.
either way, it doesn't matter to me, as long as they feel loved and they
Yeah.
understand the notion of family and
No.
they understand security. But it's just so heartwarming with these teenagers they're so appreciative sometimes. And it's just so touching for them to just be like, wow, thanks. You don't expect
no, I get it. I get it. My oldest, I get it. It's, we had gone to New York just recently, and you could just see in his eyes he'd never been. And he was just like, my other kids, we'd had them since younger, so they experienced a lot more. Listen, Pam, I will tell you, I could talk to you all day long. You are an amazing human. We say this quite often. Each and every one of us have an opportunity to be good humans, but we also have an opportunity to teach our children, when we adopt them from the system, of 3 things. Number 1, they could give up. Your 7 didn't. Number 2, they could give in. And that means they could be the statistics that we see every day. Or number 3, they can give it all they got. And that's exactly what they're doing. Listen, I want you and I to keep in touch. I cannot wait for our families to meet, because I'm telling you, we are so similar.
Yes.
We are so similar. And I do want you back on Fostering Change real soon. Listen, everybody, this has been, and you all can tell I've smiled more than I have smiled in a long time. This has been an unbelievable episode. I hope that you share it. I hope that you comment. Please, Fostering Change at comfortcases.org. Pam, how can we get a hold of you?
Well, you can start with my Instagram. I call it Second Chance 7. And that was really because my husband and I had a second chance at being parents. And, the kids say, this is our second chance too. My oldest named his Instagram Second Chance Addie, whose name is Adelino. So Second Chance 7 on Instagram. And I love sharing foster stories and helping people who are interested or answering questions. So just message me on there. It's the best way.
And by the way, email those questions as well to fosteringchange@comfortcases.org, because the more questions I get, the more chance I get to have Pam back on. So
That
listen,
would be great.
I hope each and every one of you have an amazing rest of your month. Please do not forget that the month of November is National Adoption Awareness Month. But for families like mine and like Pam's, we want every month to bring awareness to adoption, because adoption is absolutely magical. Have a good day, everybody. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for listening or watching the latest episode of Fostering Change. All of us on our team hope that you've learned something new today and have been inspired to be a good human. Now, just a reminder that you can always find Fostering Change on your favorite channels on Google, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and others, including, of course, comfortcases.org. I want to give a big thank you to all of you for joining us each and every week. And a reminder that if you have a suggestion for a guest, or maybe you might have a question about today's podcast, or are interested in becoming a sponsor of Fostering Change, please don't hesitate to email me personally at fosteringchange@comfortcases.org. Now, that's it for now. Thanks again, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.